Okay, we're now streaming and recording, so we
Should
can
be set.
we can call the meeting to order. And John, if you've got stuff to say, we'll try having you unmute, but if we end up with that background of whatever that other meeting was, we may have to mute you again. I'm sorry.
I don't know what that could be, but I'll mute this and I'll send you an email if necessary.
Yep, that'd be perfect. And I can read whatever you send. And I'll make sure my email, because I've got two screens up, so I can make sure.
Can you hear it? Can you hear that background now?
Yes. But not now. So I don't know. All right. So we have a pretty short agenda. Carly has been pulled away for a bit, so she may be coming in later in the meeting and can chime in with any of her staff reports. I have to admit, I have not read last meeting's minutes. I might have, but I don't remember. Have others read it, and are there changes to be made, or do we want to approve last time's minutes?
I don't remember getting them.
I don't either. So I was thinking it's just me not remembering, but if no one else remembers, then maybe we didn't get them.
Were they not in the packet?
I don't know. Mail attached, no, I don't think so. So I guess we should just postpone that to the next meeting, because if none of us have read them, we can't exactly approve them. Everybody good with that?
I'm good with that, but I usually was requesting at one point in time that within a couple weeks after the meeting that we were sent an email with those minutes to pursue, as opposed to waiting till 3 days before or a week before the meeting and then getting them in a packet.
I agree with you, but I just don't remember
getting them. Yeah, well, I'm saying I don't think that's the paradigm right now, and I'd like that to be the paradigm, is that if somebody could write up at least, if they're not technically minutes, at least notes from the meeting for us to review. So like before I forget what we actually talked about.
Right.
So if it was done within 7 to 10 days, that would be great. If we got an email on that, that would be my request.
I will just let you know right now that we are, with all of the staff reductions, it's down to 2 of us with 4 boards. So we'll do what we can, but we just don't have the staff capacity that we used to have.
That was what I was going to say, Arnie, is that's great to be wanting to do that, but I don't know that it's going to be feasible. And I'm thinking that I don't think I got the minutes. Carly barely had time to even get the agenda pulled together, so I'm suspecting that we just don't have minutes for the last meeting.
They are posted in the packet, but if you didn't have a chance to pull the packet off of the website, then you clearly have not had a chance to look at them. So that makes sense.
But I guess I've never been told that they're posted on a website and where to get them. So maybe that would be a place to start, because I've always gotten them as an attachment to an email.
Yeah, so what should usually happen is when we post the agenda, there's actually a hyperlink that's in the agenda that you can click and go directly to that portion of the packet.
Oh, well, that's all right. I'm sorry, I'm making sure. Oh, I see.
Give it a try, see if you can get to them, because that's typically how we have them for the other boards.
Yep, that looks to be, okay, I think, okay, now I've got to get out of that, if it'll let me. Oh, come on. Oh.
And it's okay if you want to table them or postpone until the next meeting, that's fine.
I think if none of us have read them, we need to just table that and do it at the next meeting. So maybe Summer, if you can lend us a hand even during the meeting, just send us, so you remind us, send us, because the agenda I got doesn't have any hyperlinks in it. So if you could maybe just send us the official agenda we should have gotten, and then we can all go find that thing. And if we have issues, we can get back with you. Does that work?
Sure.
Thank you. So we will move on to board and staff reports. And I know Carly has some things, but she's not with us yet. So Mark, what do you got? And nothing is fine, but
Yeah, I don't really have anything like a formal report put together. I talked to Carly earlier today about attending this. I came prepared to talk about our water reporting and the water master plan and what we might be generating in the future for those numbers. So I'll try to answer those questions as best as I can.
Okay. And we definitely, I think that'll be, maybe we'll just go through all other board and Summer, if you have any staff reports, and then we can circle back to you before we jump into the conservation plan stuff. So any other board reports, board member reports?
I was gonna note we have a MOP meeting on the 15th that I just sent an email out about. And the first half of that MOP meeting is going to be the water is an attorney from Salt Lake City who was instrumental in the writing of the water banking laws. And he will be giving an hour presentation from about 1:10 to 2 o'clock, so to speak, at that meeting. Most of you have gotten links to that. I believe, Jeremy, are you on that list too? You are, Jeremy.
I read the notes. Even when I don't attend, I enjoy reading your emails. I'll say that.
Anyways, there will be an hour-long presentation on water banking at that meeting. And then at the end of the MOP meeting, which I'm hoping to be able to 3:30 ground, Mark Stilson will be giving an hour-long presentation on groundwater monitoring in Spanish Valley, the third of his 3 presentations. So that meeting is at this old Spanish Trail Arena where we can sit 6 feet apart, but there will also be a Zoom opportunity or a Google Meets opportunity to stay remotely. And then the only other report I had was that I received a couple of emails on the Lions back and groundwater protection about how there was some people that were concerned about it. And I went and found the documents associated with those from John Weissite and forwarded them on to Chuck Williams and to Carly so that if they had been lost during the changes in personnel, they now have the groundwater protection plan, all 62 megabytes of it in their possession for the Lions Back development. Okay. That's my report.
What you got? Okay. Jeremy, you got anything?
Nope.
John, you have anything? Not really. You don't have to. Okay. So we will, maybe we should, as we go, the only other item on the agenda is the water conservation plan update. I did send everybody a draft new outline that came out of our discussion from the last meeting. I figured that was, I took notes while we talked and I did it immediately after the last meeting. John, if you don't have a copy of that, I can do a screen share so that everybody can see it. It does make talking still a little bit awkward, but anyway, what we did at the last meeting, just since you weren't able to attend, John, is we went through the last conservation plan and sort of identified the items that were things that are just a function of city staff updating, things like, the history and government and population in Moab, the things like the water source, which will include some of the reports that have been going on, political boundaries, water rights, the water system, and better explanations of the distribution, treatment, and fiscal and financial resources available, and then current use. And then we talked, and we had some topics, there's items I put in red that were the ones where we felt that we really wanted to make sure we had some dialogue between, while the bulk of the work would happen by city staff, we'd have dialogue between city staff and us to make sure we understood that, or make sure that things are sourced as we think they ought to be. And then the orange section was the things that we talked about being more generated by the board, perhaps with some assistance from staff, and the writing would end up happening with a lot of help from staff to make sure it actually flows. But that these would be the things that we really need to work on. And so my hope today, after we hear some from Mark on whatever they've been working on so far and any parts of this, that we could really start to look at the sections that are that need to come from the board, and how do we want to divvy out that, or do we want to start having meetings to talk about specific topics? So that's kind of where we're at with that, just to get John up to speed, since you've had to miss a couple meetings, if that's okay.
No, hear me and only me.
Yes.
I tried to get on this through the YouTube channel because I didn't have a link, and it may have been playing that at the same time.
That's probably what was happening.
Okay, that's now off.
Hooray! Good job.
Now I have a link.
All right. Thank you, John.
Carly, the only thing I wanted to say about what you're talking about is when I'm in town, I try and attend meetings when I can. And I always try and bring up the question, folks, do you know if there's water for this development? And I always get the answer back, yes, the city engineer says there's water for the development. And then I have to explain, I don't mean is there water today? I mean, will there be water in 5 years? And looking around from what I get from going to meetings is no one seems to be concerned about the fact that we don't know how much water we have or how much we get every year. Is this a place where we can mention things like that? I don't know one purpose of the conservation board should be to conserve water for a purpose. And maybe that purpose is to see to it that we don't run out of water. And I don't see the city or the county being at all concerned about this. I hear words about it, but I don't see actions that show that they're concerned about the fact that we have a checking account here where we don't know how much we make every month. We only know how much we spend, and we don't know how much we have in our account. Would this be a place to mention that again? As maybe a purpose of the board to extend our water supply as long as possible, because we don't know how big our water supply is.
I think as I'm looking through this, the outline of what I put together from the last meeting, that could fit in a couple spots. I think it could fit the very beginning of this. We have water conservation, item I, why conserve water, impact of various users on conservation. That may be a place that fits, because that's talking about like, what is the volume? What is all this being? The other place.
It could also go in underwater system too. I mean, yeah, I agree. There's several places with something going there. I just wonder if folks agree that this is a place to put this. And I'd like to know if other folks think that this is as important as I think it is.
The floor is open.
I'll speak to that. I think, John, when you say no one, that would be with the exception of me.
When I say no one, I kind of exaggerate a bit.
Quite special. I think there's a few of us. That's why we all sit here.
I think, and I think it's good to mention that we've had these conversations a lot, and I don't want us to devolve or backtrack, and I don't want us to not take seriously everything we're talking about. But I just want to say that there are people, certainly ourselves included, within this county and the city who are doing this work, and that's the productivity of these meetings more than anything else. So I think it's a good point to bring up, and it should be integral in this document, but just for clarity's sake and just for my own side of things. Yeah.
If I could just say one more, that's one of the reasons why we're having a groundwater monitoring meeting next week, and we're discussing more groundwater monitoring so we can determine whether or not we're actually overdrafting or not, John. And water rights is, Mark Stilson has turned the corner on being a little concerned about whether or not we are actually going to be overdrafting, and he's going to push long and hard. Well, he's going to push hard. However, he doesn't have the funding. It may be our position to push the city and the county to help with funding for that, for the monitoring plan, to determine whether or not we're actually overdrawing at this point in time. But that's not going to happen right here today. One other thing I got from Mark Stilson the other day was that we've got if you're not aware, we have a new state engineer. She
No,
first
no, I did
state,
not know.
first state engineer that was a she, by the way, has a little different view and may not want to go after a groundwater monitoring plan. She may want to impose a change in policy before we go after a groundwater management plan. These meetings will continue to happen and we are concerned with them. But yes, anything we can bring to the attention of the city and to the citizens of the city about the fact that we have a limited water supply, I would completely approve of. And I believe it should be somewhere in this document also, John. I don't think we need to rehash the fact that we don't know what our checking account is or how much we're getting and so on and so forth. But yes, we need to put something in here in this conservation plan about that. Probably the best thing we could do with this conservation plan is finally figure out what our account actually holds.
So
That would be nice.
what I've done as you guys have been talking and been looking at this, and I've put it in 3 locations. I've put it underneath environmental concerns, regional nature of aquifer. I mean, it may not be exactly where it wants to live, but I've stuck it up in there. I've also included it underneath impact of various users on conservation, because I think that's a piece of what I'm hearing being talked about. You know, we've got San Juan County, we've got other things going on, the whole groundwater management plan. And then also under current efforts, groundwater management planning and protection needed and in process. So that way, at least, does that work that it's in those 3 locations for now?
I think so. I just like beating the drum as often as possible because I know Arnie listens. I know everybody on this board understands, but I don't know how many other people really understand the risk we're taking right now. We could end up like Cedar City.
And I think that that's exactly, you know, like what we tried to do at the last meeting was start to go, all right, what are the pieces we really want to make sure we're influencing in this planning process for this plan document. And so I think this is great. This is what I was hoping to get out of today is, all right, well, what else do we need to stick in here so we can start to have the discussions? And
Good, thanks.
I did also put in, and Jeremy, I apologies. I just put what you sent me last week. I took it from your email and dumped it in here. So I know how I am when I write something, I read it later and go, oh God, wait, I want to change that. But I figured what I'm going to do with this is just keep doing that as we have discussions. And then that way we can keep adding to it, change it. So feel free, especially since you're the author of the stuff underneath the goals of conservation here, change that as you see fit. If you want to expand upon it, narrow it, whatever, you know, that's all good.
Sounds good to me.
So Mark, I know there's been a lot going on with all kinds of things that have taken the engineering department all over the place. And it's also really interesting right now, I'm sure, with all the different staff changes at the city. But what are your thoughts as far as this conservation plan update and the pieces that might end up coming from primarily the engineering department as far as capacity, timing, things that you already know about that you want to tell us, or things that would be you'd like our help with?
So honestly, I'm kind of stepping into this from nowhere a little bit. So I'm not really sure that I have anything sort of positive to give you right now.
Right.
I'm kind of taking over for Eric, and I just jumped on this meeting for today. That being said, you know, we can generate whatever numbers we're going to need for this. I'm not even really sure what that's going to be, what that's going to need to be. I suspect it'll be something like, you know, we'll have to look at numbers of what we're pulling out in a given year, what we're using on the consumer end. Yeah, beyond that, I'm still a little bit lacking in direction, I suppose I'd say.
What we talked about at the last meeting, and hopefully, you know, Arnie and Jeremy, you can correct me if I captured this wrong, but under water use, we had current use and then having an understanding of the numbers of connections by type. So, you know, residential versus commercial versus industrial, that kind of thing. And then also current use per capita, but then also current use by type, because we've had a lot of discussions, and I think this talks back to, harkens back to what John was just saying, you know, the residential use versus commercial use. We've had some stuff come to us, but it hasn't been real clear to help us really understand like the difference between hotel and restaurant use versus residential use, that kind of thing. And then we also had a section in here that's probably going to be the hardest one for the engineering department and public works to sort out, but impacts of visitor population on use was one of the things in here to try to wrap our heads around, like, what does that really do? Since our visitor population increases our, you know, per capita, we might be using a lot of water, but that's partly because it's not taking into account that on weekends we have 15,000 more people here. So our use per capita is kind of a false number. And then we had a section in here on trends and anticipated changes. Does any of that strike you as like, oh yeah, that'll be easier? Uh-oh, hang on, we're treading into bad places here.
So on the source end of things, so that we count the water in two places. We count it on the source end, the wells and the springs, and then we count it again when we bill people for their water use. Certainly on the source end, I already get data every year. We have to report to the water rights folks. We get daily numbers, so we can look at, you know, between a Monday and a Tuesday, we can see what gets used. And so in theory, you could say, you know, over the course of Monday through Thursday, you could look at the water here, and then on the weekend it bumps up or something like that. How we could tease out tourism from that, I don't know, that you could just assume that that's on the weekend or anything like that, but right. We do have that resolution of data at least.
Okay, I'm taking some notes. Go ahead.
There's some specifications with the Department of Natural Resources on this water conservation plan. The only reason why the city's forced to do it is because if they don't do it, they can't get money from DNR. That was the strings that tied to this water conservation plan. It forces all cities, all municipal providers to provide one every 5 or 6 years. In that documentation, they define what are institutions and what are schools and what are those other types, what's commercial and what's not. So when we talk to Levi, who just joined us here, hi Levi, when they start talking about breaking those into parts, those are defined already for you. You don't have to decide whether a park is an institution or whatever. Follow what I'm saying?
But I thought, Arnie, part of what we wanted to talk about or ask if we can sort out is not just what DWR wants from us, but also what would help us better understand exactly what John's question is, which is how are different uses affecting our water use?
Yes, exactly. That too.
So it sounds like what I think I'm hearing is we want to do, like, sure, we need to do what the state requires, but we also might want to we might be splitting rather than lumping in a few situations, or taking a lumped thing and splitting it a little bit so we have a better understanding for us.
I think what I was also, exactly. Thank you very much. I think I was just trying to explain to Mark that there's some sidebars on this document that are defined by UDDNR or UDWRE explicitly, and that's provided in a document for you to help lead the way for you. Okay, Mark?
So when we do our water reporting, we do break those out by residential, commercial, industrial, though we don't report any for that, and institutional. And I would think that aligns with those categories that you're talking about.
It would make sense if it would.
Yeah.
So Levi, thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking some time out. We're just in the middle of kind of looking at the outline of the water conservation plan update that I put together after the meeting last month to try to, okay, what do we want this one to be? And so one thing that I wanted to ask you, being in the position of public works director now, is are there things in terms of the water distribution system that you want to make sure we capture in this? And I know at the last meeting, we included in our list already, condition of the distribution systems, maintenance backlog needs, and then financial resources expressly because we had, we know that the system needs a lot of repairs and is behind. So is there anything in that you want to make sure we're including in here? Or that, you feel like might be missing?
I haven't had a chance to look over the document.
Fair enough.
Um,
I can send it to you.
That would be great. That'd be great. So yeah, at this moment, I'm not sure, to be fair and honest.
Right. I think what we talked about last, what's your email?
It's L Jones at Moab City.
Why does my computer not know that? It knows everything else. Okay, I just sent it to you.
Thank you.
And yeah, I guess what else do you guys want to talk about on this in terms of moving forward? Do we want to try to divvy up some tasks or schedule some future meetings to talk about specific sections? I mean, at some point, I'm hoping things will calm down for different city departments like engineering and public works so that we can maybe start to get some of these updates on some of the parts that have to come from city staff. But I also understand that might take a minute. So yeah, what do the rest of you guys feel in terms of scheduling this moving forward?
I want to be working with the city on the environmental concerns part C under 1.2, if I could. Mark, are you reading Carr's outline from the water conservation update? Do you see it there? The red stuff is what we're supposed to work with the city, and I want to be part of that environmental concerns with working with the city.
I don't even have this open in front of me.
Do you need me to send it to you?
I
Yeah,
think so.
Let me send it real quick. Send document and your email. What's your email, Mark?
Mine's a little tricky, but it's M and then my last name, if you can read it there on my little talking head box.
Yep. Joel Saint. J-O. Okay, I think I got it. We'll find out. It's moabcity.org, right?
Yes.
Okay. And just to be for full transparency, I've just been trying to take notes and then get it out so we can keep discussion flowing. There's nothing official about this. It didn't come from city staff or anything at any point yet. I'm just trying to help keep us being able to move on this. And I think, maybe what's reasonable and realistic to talk about probably would be great if Carly was here for this, but Summer may or may not have some ideas on this. But I know there's been a lot of changes going on at City Hall and a lot of changes in city structure and employees and all that. I think we have to have this plan done by the end of next year or something. I think that's correct, something like that.
If I'm remembering correctly, that was the original status, but I feel like I remember her saying that there might even be a year beyond that it could be done.
Right.
The summer
Right.
of not next year, but I don't know, maybe, I can't recall, but it was longer of a term than we had
Right.
originally said we'd work with under.
Yeah, because it's not the end of this year. It's at the earliest, it's sometime next year, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And I think it seems reasonable to expect we won't have this done this year. But I also think it's reasonable to say it would be really nice to be working on it this year, and especially on things that we feel are particularly relevant. I think the groundwater management planning, if that is or isn't going to happen, and like groundwater monitoring, like we've talked about over the years, are all big things. But what, from a city staffing perspective, as far as, and I know I'm kind of putting Levi and Mark on the spot here, and I don't mean to do that, but I mean, I know you guys are kind of buried right now. does it seem reasonable that we could maybe be talking as a group about environmental concerns and distribution system stuff in the next, I don't know, by September's meeting? Or like, what's a reasonable timeline to think we might be able to have some meat to talk about instead of just concepts? And I don't know is a perfectly fine answer.
Still, yeah. So when you're talking about what meat we would kind of want to have for that from the engineering department, is that you'd want to see some analysis, some numbers here. This is what.
Yeah, or just like, I know we've been working, you guys have been working with ChemCom, we have the USGS report. If we're going to be putting together a section of this plan that's about environmental concerns, which is geology, the regional aquifer, changing climate, is that something we can expect to start to talk about in September, or is that more realistic for October? Like, that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, of what's sort of realistic.
I suppose right now all of the documents that we would be working off of is we've got KINCOM's HESA reports. We've got all of our previous reporting to the state. So we already have all of that on hand. Anything that we would be generating new would be, like you were talking about earlier, some sort of analysis for trying to break out hotels from all of those numbers or something like that. So I'm not even really sure. I would default to October to be safe. Yeah.
So maybe we could start to think that maybe in October we could be touching on some of those items. And maybe, Levi, would that be reasonable for us as far as some of our understanding the distribution system stuff better, that we could be having some input from the Public Works Department later in the fall? Is that at all reasonable with where you guys are at with staffing and all the things you're juggling right now as you're shifting into this position? Like, I just want to go with what's realistic for you guys. I don't want to be like, we want this and it's impossible.
Right. Yeah, and we collect the data daily and enter it, but it'd be working with the engineering department and putting stuff in spreadsheets. So yeah, late fall.
Late fall might be ready. Okay.
Can I interject for just a second?
Yeah.
Maybe what we also ought to be talking about is some sidebars, because the numbers change, on an annual basis. And maybe we ought to sit down right between us right now and say, hey, we're going to use numbers through 2019 and not necessarily be waiting for 2020 numbers.
Right.
And do you, Mark, I'm assuming you give the water rights people a report on an annual basis. So sometime in January, you have to have that number. And I'm not sure we actually have to have 2020 numbers in this document. We can go with 2019 numbers as far as I'm concerned. And if that helps move this process forward, I'd be all for that. That if we just say, hey, we're going to use 2019 numbers as where we are currently, I don't have a problem with that. And maybe if we had that as a sidebar, that'd be more helpful in moving us towards something we can produce.
Is that something other board members are fine with?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems reasonable to me. And I also think with some of this stuff, we may have, by going through the process with the 2019 numbers, it may become easier to then look at things annually after that. Because if you have a way that you've organized it, analyzed it and whatnot, then there could be tables or whatnot that are very easy to recreate in subsequent years as well. So it seems like, that maybe that's a really great idea, because we could then update it regularly as we saw a need to do that.
For what it's worth, and gang, I'm sorry, I'm 40 minutes late. I was involved doing something else and completely spaced it out. So my apologies. I like what Arnie's idea, the idea of using 20 old numbers. And then if we're so fortuitous as to actually have new numbers at the last minute come in before the reports has to be released, it's a relatively easy thing to do to update what's already been written, as opposed to leaving a big gaping hole in there just because nobody was sure what we were going to do. So I like that part of it.
Okay.
I would like to just put the caveat in there is that we did not see the tourist population that we normally did this spring. So our numbers might be a little different for this spring. But if we have some 2018 or 2015 or historical numbers out there to gauge with it, I think we'll be just fine.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the other, one of the other things in this plan is having some discussion of the impact of the changing climate. And I think that there's a high probability we're going to have some market changes going on that will be affecting travel and tourism. So things may well be a very, very different animal in 12 months or 24 months. So all we can do is work with what we had, the information we had. So I think 2019 is probably a good benchmark because that also was pretty, major year as far as visitation. Because I think using 2020 numbers could actually be a little problematic because they might be a little depressed. What else do you guys want to talk about? Do we want to get into some of these sections about the water conservation plan and sections we want to, that are more coming from us as far as like some of the soft goals or some of the education and outreach or other things like that we want to make sure we're including? We have until 4, but we don't have to use until 4 if we don't have much to say.
I'll just add that within the section that into which were dropped my words, I would be happy to, whether it's just taking a first go at the heading or looking at the section as a whole, coming up with something that we could then, parse out more concretely in a conversation in a meeting. That was my understanding of what you're kind of looking for, and what we were looking for as a whole was take something on and bring it to the table, and then let's try to start breaking things down that way in terms of what we want to see in the new document based on what's already there and some of these newer ideas. So if there's a priority section within water conservation that we'd like to see or work on first more than anything else, I'd be happy to start drafting something, that we could look at this fall.
Yes, I like that idea. Is there stuff that particularly jumps out at any of you guys? Because I think that would be great to have something we could really get into. We hadn't fleshed out some of we have the state imposed goals we have to have, but the soft goals and local goals, we hadn't actually determined what any of those wanted to be. So do we want to talk about those topics for now? And then maybe that can lead to some things you could work on, Jeremy?
Sure, that'd be fine. And I think the way I would probably start would, not necessarily extrapolate and that I would make it longer, but probably try to become less wordy in looking at conservation as a term itself, and then going through each of these headings and at least putting something down, if not equivalently across all subheadings. But yeah, having a better sense of what soft and local goals are now would be helpful.
So toss out ideas, guys.
I thought at one point in time, Rosemarie had some goals for us, but I don't remember what they were. I personally, if you look at what back in 1997, when Huntsman said we're gonna cut our water use by 10% by 2025, and then in 2000, I believe it was, our current governor Herbert said, nope, it's going to be 25% by 2025, and then it was 2015 or some year like that he came out and said, no, we got to do it sooner than that. And then they finally came out with DNR's one, which they want us to decrease our values by another 17% from where we were in I forget what the year was exactly, but it was very, very recent year. And I looked at some of the stuff we put out at one point in time, or somebody put out at one point in time, and worked with Jeff on that. And we were close to getting 3/4 of the way to our 25% reduction in per capita in 2018 or 2017 or something like that. So we've already made huge headway in terms of water conservation if you look at it per capita. And that was with our increase in tourism over those years. I'm thinking it's going to be tough to cut another 17%. I'm just here to tell you, per capita, I'm just saying it's going to be tough. I didn't say we can't make it. And that's why we're going to discuss our local goals, I guess.
Well, and Arnie, here's a request I have of you maybe by the next meeting is if you could find some of that stuff you and Jeff worked on and some of these different things so that we could have a section that talks about exactly that. Because I think that would get all of us on the same page, you know, and so maybe it's a half a page or a page that goes, okay, here's what we've done and where we're at. Here's what it really means to try to meet the state's goals. Because I think that would really help us moving forward with the soft goals and the local goals to be like, okay.
I can excuse me. I can start with the state-imposed numerical goals and bring some numerical facts of what we've already done to the table and have that. I will write that section for you.
That would be fabulous.
Okay, I got A.
And I'm writing it down in these notes, which I will when we're done with this meeting, because I know how things have been going for me and I think a lot of you. I can't seem to not get distracted into 10,000 other emergencies. So this will have some typos in it, but I'm going to send this to everybody as soon as this meeting's over so that you guys have something to look at and work with, as imperfect as it may be, because I think that'll help us move forward faster and easier. So not having the state imposed numerical goals yet fleshed out, which Arnie's going to kindly do for us maybe by the next meeting even, are there different soft or local goals we've already talked about that I'm not remembering that we maybe should start to throw in here so that Jeremy has something to start to chew on about this? Yeah.
So let me throw out this much, Car, if you will, as a trade to be considered. I can tell you that in the hotspot committee, we're considering, and Mark's going to be privy to this here in just another day or two, adding more parking spots to downtown. One of the popular concepts that Matt Hancock has been pushing is modeled after something Lancaster, California did, which is basically a lot of parking in the middle of the street, end-to-end angled parking, if you will. And the slide that he showed of what California did looks gorgeous. All right. I mean, it's a bunch of cars parked in the middle of the road, narrow travel lanes and so forth. But what makes it really pretty is a whole bunch of trees planted basically in pedestrian access lanes in between the cars. And it looks gorgeous. The question is, if Moab is to, as Arnie suggests, to further cut another 5, 10, 15% or whatever off our culinary water consumptions, and that water for those trees comes from city groundwater as opposed to surface water, which is already basically appropriated, but that can be negotiated, then should we even be talking about trees? Everybody loves trees. People that live here, so do the tourists. It's a great amenity for those of us that are trying to keep the town pleasant from a tourist point of view, so we're all for it. But it comes with a cost in terms of a lot of water to be used to water those trees and so forth. So that's a conservation trade that we might want to factor in.
So one thing that I like that one is one to add. And what I've been writing down as you've been talking, Mike, is I think that begs the question of what varieties of trees. Are you looking for giant cottonwoods or are you looking for desert willows, which are actually a very dry, drought tolerant tree? And also what can you do then with the stormwater drainage to actually what, like I've got a desert willow in front of my house that doesn't get any water at all. It's looking a little sad this year, but if you had some of the water from the street runoff actually eddying out in that spot when we get rain, that may be plenty for that tree to survive. So that might be something that, you know, I think that's something we have talked about as far as green infrastructure is one of those items. I don't know if that's a soft goal or a local goal or where that fits, but maybe that's a place that does fit with that. I don't know. Does that seem to
Yeah, that's a great idea. That idea keeps surfacing. You and Jeff have been great about that. It's just something to start factoring in now at the design time. The hotspot so-called focus group, we've been narrowing in on exactly how to put in the parking spots. We're about to run those by Chuck and Mark here in another day or two. And then we'll have to sell it to UDOT and then have to sell it to the downtown alliances and sell it to the residences and so forth. So, but all those are great ideas, but we're talking about a little more money. I suspect it always is when it comes to more complex infrastructure, but it might very much be worthwhile doing, you bet.
Okay. All right, what else have we got? So I've added green infrastructure with a brief summary of what you said into this document as a place to go. What else have we talked about? I'm trying to remember other things we've talked about as far as soft goals or more locally specific goals.
Well, one other, if I may have the floor once again, maybe this is a better subject for members' reports and so forth, but in-stream flow has come up a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that I'm on the board of Moab Irrigation Company, and we've been noticed that since the last flood, our lower dam, which blocks off water for two of the ditches that actually go through town, has leaked a lot worse than it used to. It's leaking enough so that basically you get your 24/7 in-stream flow like you always wanted, courtesy. The problem is we're trying to fix it and stop it. Because it's reducing the amount of water we have to give to our users. So it's the old-fashioned conflict of nature versus people kind of thing. But
so that might fit with what Arnie talked about. It's happening at the MOP meeting next week, which is the water banking discussion as well, because maybe some of that water, does that apply, Arnie, where what could happen is, say I've got Moab Irrigation Company shares that right now I donate to the youth garden, but I can't use them. So instead they could be used in the stream.
It's a little, Mike's going to hopefully reinforce what I'm about to say. It's a little more complicated than that. Some of the problem is actually delivering the water. And if they were to find a quarter or a third of CFS that they had available, they could probably find somebody to deliver it to that isn't getting the water shares that they're actually currently looking for right now.
Right.
So it's a little more physically, not physically, but physically impossible given their current distribution system to make that work. So the question becomes, can we change, to me anyways, can we change the distribution system? And this is a great place to bring this up, Mike and Cara, is that back in the day when I first interviewed Rebecca Andrus, one of the first things she talked about was the fact that we may at some point in time be relying on Moab Irrigation Company water for our secondary watering system in the city. And we should probably be looking for it to do more of that for us. Historically, the conflict was the city wanted to own the water rights and not just shares. I think the city has changed its position at that point in time. And at some point down in here, when we're talking about conservation infrastructure needs to sustain and improve delivery, we can actually be putting in there, although not everybody's going to be happy about it, and putting it on paper and getting it done are two different things, a pressurized system for Moab Irrigation Company, at least for part of the distribution system, if not all of it. Not all of it is apparently set up as will work with a pressurized distribution system, but there are parts that, and it would be very helpful at times to some of Moab Irrigation Company's shareholders too. So what I'm saying here is that underneath infrastructure needs to sustain and improve delivery, pressurizing Moab irrigation system, I believe, would be able to conserve water, okay, because people could use timers as opposed to overflow, which most of us realize that flood irrigation is not necessarily a very conservative way to use water. That at least that discussion needs to be in there. And hopefully the city itself would be in favor of pressurizing that system. And we've got some new people in W through Division of Water Resources that might be able to make us help that happen too.
Yeah, exactly, Arnie. I agree with you 100%. A lot of this, guys, is going to have to wait till the city has some money to spend on this kind of stuff. You guys know very well that with sales tax hits and all that, we don't have any money for this kind of thing, but it's all, hopefully down the road we will. And those would be great subjects. You bet.
Okay, so I've got that added in 2 or 3 places, so it'll get covered somewhere. What else we got? Are there things, you know, and Levi, this is open to you too. Are there things from your perspective that you'd really like to see us talk about as far as conservation or improving the water system, the condition? I think we have some stuff from what Chuck presented to the city a while ago of the backlog and maintenance that could very easily be inserted into the condition of the distribution system and the maintenance backlogs and needs. So that would be easy to stick in there. Are there other things though, as you're getting fully immersed in all of the apps? I know you know the water system extremely well. So what else, is there anything you would like to highlight in that section at all that we should maybe be talking about? And no is fine if you don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, you're good. Not at the moment.
Okay.
Your email never came through.
Okay, I probably got your name wrong. When I get this done at the end of the meeting, I'll get it to everybody. And I'll
Yeah,
make
you're
sure.
good. I sent you an email so you had it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
no problem. Thank you.
I'm having a hard time since Carly's not here. There's not someone else to help run the meeting when I get distracted.
No, you're good. You're good.
Can I ask Levi a question where we're taking broad strokes at conservation's measurements to implement? We've danced around no watering in the summer months between 10 and 6 p.m. a bunch of times. And I guess I'm going to ask the question to Levi, if more people were on sprinklers that were on smart timers than was watering in the evening, which is much more, conserves a lot more water. You get a lot more bang for your buck in terms of what your irrigation actually does for you. Would that help at all with your distribution system in terms of you getting a surge of people wanting to use a whole lot of water in the late afternoon and in the early morning? Do you see highs and lows in the demands of your system at this point in time? And
yeah, absolutely. We have big surges in the morning. Usually people hitting the trails, all the hotel usage. People like to irrigate first thing in the morning. And then in the evening time too, everybody's getting home, coming off the trails, they're taking their showers. The restaurants are starting to get packed and people are coming home and doing their daily routine. And then shorten around dinner time, everybody's irrigating around dinner time too. I strongly encourage to irrigate after the sun goes down before it comes back up. That would between the hours of 11 and 4 o'clock in the morning be great. But by the time 4 or 5 o'clock roll around, we're starting to see a high demand, and it's a lot of tourism. It's a hotel usage, and some people are already irrigating during those hours. So
yeah.
But we still need to get the message out there, because you travel around the town daily and you still see water running down the gutter in the middle of the afternoon, and it's wasteful. And then they're paying for water that's they're not utilizing. It's just going down the gutter. So.
And I think also, just like overhead spray is more efficient than flood, I think drip is also more efficient than overhead spray. And I think that that's something that should be included in here as well. Because you can use a very tiny, like I'm using drip tape on my vegetable garden and I'm watering and getting a fair lot of water out there, but it's, I have to have a 12 PSI pressure reducer on there, because if I have more than that, it explodes the whole system. So I think there's ways, I think that would be good maybe in the soft goals. And then I'm also going to add that into education and outreach as another spot where that might fit. And we can change all this. I'm just trying to take notes from today. What else we got?
Did I answer your question, Arnie?
Absolutely. It was just what I wanted to hear. Right. Thank you very much. It would be better for your system at this point in time, in terms of the pressure being put on your system in the early morning, in the morning and the evening, if people were to do their irrigating in between 11 and 4 a.m. I heard you loud and clear.
Yeah. Well, for the main reason that they would use less water.
Yes.
Yeah.
If they watered during that time, that's the biggest issue.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I'm going to add in there too, under education, I'm going to add that I think there's a lot more we can do about how much water things really need. I've really been pushing the envelope on that a lot at the nursery and in And now I actually have a small place downtown that I'm planting on my own, and also out of Mayberry, where we're getting it, where I'm installing plants in July and watering only once a week from the first day that I put the plants in the ground. And there's a certain there's a certain planting technique I'm using and other things, but I think that there's a lot of people who are still watering every single day. And I think we could do a better job getting information out about what you really need for your plants and how that it'll actually make them healthier if you water less frequently. So I'm going to just stick something about that in education and outreach.
Yeah, and a couple other things to think about too is our community, we have a lot of swamp coolers in our community, and ones that aren't operating efficiently waste water. They're constantly overflowing. They're running down the gutter, and overflowing into people's yards. But then you also got your internal where the toilet or drippy faucet, if they're not working properly, they use high amounts of water too, and you don't notice it because it goes down the drain. It's not puddling anymore. It's just going straight down the drain. So those are big issues too.
Well, and I know once I found out, I think a water main broke into a rental I had, and it took a water bill to figure it out because we didn't even know. And then the water bill was just huge. And it was like, oh, I guess we have a problem. So yeah, I think, okay, so I'm going to put, I'm going to call it personal infrastructure. And that's something that I know we had talked about a little bit with when Pat was in your position, Levi, of like what the city could do to help people understand that these things might be broken, and then maybe not come into the home and fix it for them, but help provide resources that can help people know how to figure out they have a leak or how to fix it themselves. Because a lot of those things aren't that hard to fix yourself if you know how.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We've been working with Lisa, our communication specialist, and we're putting small messages on the bills.
Right.
And we send them out. Some deal with water conservation and other stuff. It's not just water conservation, but the Treasury Department has incentives for individuals that have bigger water leaks if they were to show proof of receipts of repairs and verify with the next month's bill that the reading is decreased, that there's some reimbursement on their bills. It's an incentive to conserve water and
through that expensive repair because wow, they might get $100 back from the city. That's a great idea.
So Levi, what Carr was insinuating was that there are leaks out there, or people have leaks, and I believe you already have what I'm trying to get out is that you actually have a relatively good leak detection or leak appreciation, if you could say it, for people's individual residences. You know what you figured out when they have a leak that's a problem leak, and you pretty much let them know that, and that we're actually already doing that should be part of our conservation program. We should be mentioning that in this document.
Right.
The other thing, what Levi's talking about, is the program he has to help people fix them should also be something we should have in this document, saying we're already doing this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, during the meter reading process, we're able to help notify customers of high bills, high water usage. And then at the same time, if it has the new style of dial and meter installed, we're able to backlog do a 3-month backlog on their usage and pinpoint when they're watering, if they're watering, or if they're continuously watering. So it kind of helps pinpoint some areas too. And then, yeah.
So what I'm saying is that the city has a really good leak detection system going on, not only for the cities at this point in time, for the city's infrastructure, but for private infrastructure also. And that's a conservation measure that the state would like to see implemented, but we're already doing it.
Yes.
Okay, that was my point there.
So who would Levi, would it be you, or is there someone else at the city who could get us easily, without having to spend a lot of time, information about those programs? Because I'm totally clueless, and so I can't really write that up very well. But who would be that person?
It would be me and the treasurer.
Okay, So
Yeah.
Public Works and Treasurer, I cannot spell, to outline existing programs is what I'm going to put in here. And then I'll get with you and whatnot when we have a minute. Okay, that's great. Hey, this is actually getting longer, guys. Thank you. That's the point. We need to start fleshing this out. What else we got? Anything, you know, any one of you engineering things going on that you feel like would be appropriate to be putting in here that we're already doing? I think that's Arnie, you've kind of nailed something that I forgot about. We don't have just, we have to dream things up. What are we already doing that we really should be celebrating in this document? I mean, I know we've got a stormwater management plan. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I can't remember anything about it at the moment, but I don't know if that's something that should be talked about or.
I remember I didn't like it.
Yeah, that's, well, that's part of why I think I don't remember it much. I mean, I've gotten a lot added to this. It's gone from 2 pages to 3 with a whole bunch of things to start fleshing out. Or do we want to kind of give this a rest and I get it to everybody and we pick it up next week or next time, or what do we want to do?
No, if nobody else wants to talk, I'll throw a few more ideas out there.
Go for it. Go for it. And I'll figure out where I'm putting them in here so they get captured.
Okay, historically, when we did go into a drought, and that is part of what I think should probably be in this document, if we were to go into a long-term drought, do we have a plan? And things that have been done historically were in the paper just a couple of weeks ago. I guess in the late 50s, we had a problem with water around here, if I remember right. And they instituted things like people on this side of the street are watering every other day, and their days to water are like that. And at some point in time, the city would need a drought plan like that. And that could be something that we could not necessarily build today, but put into our conservation plan that we need a drought mitigation plan somewhere in the next 5 years. So that the city and everybody in the city is aware of what will happen if we go into a drought. And we don't have to all of a sudden come up with these grandiose ideas to basically make sure we got water coming out of our taps.
I like that. I'm adding that under ordinances and rules to work on.
The other thing we haven't talked about, and I'm reticent to talk about them, is we've always discussed we wanted to reach out to people and get them how to understand how to irrigate their landscape, as opposed to legislating and with ordinances how they water their lawns. I think we should continue to do that myself, but if the board or the city thinks differently, that's another story. But those ordinances could be out there if they are necessary. But if we're going to put something in the conservation plan, we're going to say we're holding off on ordinances while we work on public education and outreach.
Yep. Yeah, I have the irrigation timing, duration, and frequency thing in education and outreach, but I'll stick something in here about consider if ordinance to that effect is needed, and we can decide that later. Okay. What else? Come on, Arnie, keep going.
Well, I really don't think we use our public information systems as well as we could to get out in terms of conservation outreach as well as we could. And I'm not the person to do that, but I know Jeremy's spoken on KZMU a couple times. I really think that a note in the, sorry, Levi, not about you, it's not you. A note in your water bill saying that you should conserve more water. I never read those, okay? I don't either. But if we were to use some more of our other techniques out there, whether it be Facebook or whether it be KZMU, I've noticed a few things in the paper, but once again, I'm not sure we're reaching anybody or changing any behavior with our current outreach program. And
they're about to, Arnie, they're about to, from the their water bills point of view. We just raised the water rates not long ago. And to keep up with cost of infrastructure, Chuck was a big part of this. and both the base rates. The base rates haven't got bumped too badly because we're trying to keep it from being too terribly unaffordable to low-income people here in the town. But the use rates have been and may next year as well. We broke it into 2 years, so it would be such a huge bump, particularly in a COVID year. But particularly in some of the higher tiers, which is pretty common among both commercial, particularly commercial and residential users. The water use rates per 1,000 gallons is going to go up substantially. We are going to get calls from people saying, what the hell is this? Despite all the public outreach that we've done so far. And our defense is, guys, you know, the water department's basically going broke. There's pipes that need to be replaced. There's no getting around it. That's our defense. But in theory, depending on how hard you judge water demand, then that should help curb conservation just from an expense point of view, but people aren't going to like it. And I can tell you that right now. Old timers here on the Moab Irrigation Board tell me that when people first moved into this area back in the early part of the 20th century, before they built Ken's Lake, there was freaking water everywhere. So that's what I've been told. And we're basically moving slowly, unwillingly towards something more of a Phoenix type of xeriscape. How do you say it, Cara?
Xeriscape.
Xeriscape, thank you. Yeah, sort of environment, which is necessary if you're going to have a lot of people using water, each one of them. So anyway, so there's that data point for you for what that's worth.
I remember we all commented on those and watched the vote themselves on YouTube. I was happy with the water rates to some extent. And you're right, Mike, that's going to turn some heads next year and the year after, and we're probably going to hopefully see a decrease. But we can still save a lot of water in a lot of other places too. I guess my point is our public outreach will be pushed because of the water rates that went up. But I think we could do a better job with public outreach. And I'm not sure how to make that happen, Cara.
Well,
Hey, Arnie,
go ahead.
Arnie, I think you're right about the social media thing. That's it. Everybody's focused on social media, so maybe a small YouTube video geared towards water conservation, something 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, something short, would be great. Something like that. Even post it on our website. That would be helpful. The mayor, Bobby, and I, we sat down. We did something short a couple months back, but it's not nearly enough of what we do need.
And I think I've learned using social media for a few things is you don't need to do it every day, but it needs to be more often than once a month. So I think that coming up, and we had tried to do this working a few years back, of having some kind of a schedule of when some things might happen, because then you can actually schedule that stuff to, you can just sit down and once a quarter schedule all these different things to just start popping up at the right times, and it becomes very, very simple to make that happen. So I'm adding on here, social media is way underused, videos, regular postings. One thing we've been doing, like at the nursery, we use social media a lot for advertising, but we are using it partially for actually advertising and partially for education. Like we've come up with a system of, say, once a week we do something about although everything's changed since COVID, so we're barely using it at all at the moment, frankly, but that will change again. But one thing might be an ad, but the rest of it's like, hey, did you know you don't have to water your lawn every day, that kind of a thing. So I think we can come up with some things. And then I'm also adding in here xeric landscape education, because I think there's a lot of misperceptions about what that means. That doesn't mean zero lawns. That doesn't mean gravel and cactus and yuccas only. There's a lot of nuances to it that can be quite beautiful and quite different. You can have an English garden done in a way that is laid out as a xeric landscape. So I think that there's a lot we could do with that could save a fair lot of water. So I'll stick that in there.
Can I just add one other thing?
Of course.
On the current efforts, what Mike was just speaking about of tiering our water rates, that is a conservation effort and needs to be put into this document under current efforts.
Is that, let's
number
see.
Number two. On on what? Yeah.
Sorry, I got lost. So tiered water rates implemented.
We could put in there what we changed them from and what we changed them to. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were implemented in, when were they implemented? Oh, Mike's gone. They were implemented like last month or something. Was it in June or May?
Levi, when are the current water rates implemented?
July, 1st of July.
Oh, July.
In effect, yep.
Okay, in July. So what I'm going to put in here is, in the current efforts, tiered water rates implemented in July show improvement from old rates. Is how I'm going to write it for now. Okay, cool. What else we got? I've got a few soft goals. I've got a few local goals. I mean, it's kind of starting to fill out here.
Jeremy, they don't really listen much to me when it comes to stormwater management. Would you like to venture any conversation about stormwater management?
Let me see. I'm not on mute. Certainly, and we have that mentioned down below in the conservation measures. So that seems like something that will be essential in there. Whether through, I would look to consult a few people in town as well as other documents, but absolutely, I would love to see some of that in there. I should probably review myself the stormwater management plan that we have, because it has been a while since I've even looked at it. So that would be a good start.
I recall it being something none of us were terribly fond of.
Yep.
So maybe I'll put in, maybe that's one, Jeremy, if you think you could,
Sure.
Before the next meeting or before September, like maybe that's a place, kind of like Arnie doing the state imposed numerical goals thing. So we have that as our basis. Maybe that's a really good one to get a little bit more in for the next meeting or soon. Is that reasonable?
Sure. Yeah, if you could just throw my name down on that doc that you're going to send around there, and I
wanted to ask your permission before I assigned it.
just put my name down and I'll have to do it.
Okay, yeah, so I'm putting on here, you're going to review the existing plan and make suggestions for improvements and other measures to add to this section. Does that work?
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And I'm realizing, looking at this, I think the way I did this, we have outreach and education as its own main heading, and then we have conservation outreach under conservation measures to implement. And I'm kind of wondering if that's redundant or if we need it in those two places. Should I just move it all to conservation measures to implement?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Because then we suddenly have a really big full spot, and it, a nice simple. Okay, so I'm going to add that. Oops, in here. Oh, come on. Okay. Guidelines and suggestions. Education and outreach. Okay, got it. Seems like now the piece that is the most empty, but I think it will come from some of these other things, is guidelines and I think I just need, at this point, I think it's more working on what we've gotten. Other things will fill out as we go, I think. I don't know, what are we missing? I know you guys can't see this, but just from the conversation, is there something you're like, wait a minute, this is missing?
Carl, I like the way you've got it broken down with the section 2 water conservation in terms of, okay, why conserve water? And some of Jeremy's comments work great there, and impact of various users, and then current efforts. You could lump everything that we just talked about in terms of what the city's already doing, including their public, what current outreach is going on, into that current efforts.
Yeah.
And then the goals come in with what we're talking about, and then somewhere down the line, current policies and ordinances. And
Yep.
then we go to the next one and conservation measures to implement, and it's a fairly well-defined
Yep.
document, so to speak, if you're asking my opinion. And I think if we build section number 2 here first,
Yep.
section number 3 will follow
Yep.
rather easily. So let's try to concentrate on building section number 2 right now. If you ask my opinion, if we work more on concentrating section number 2 that you have, what we're currently doing at this point in time, and then move on to section 3, I think it might flow a little better, would be in my opinion.
The only caveat to that, I agree. The only caveat to that, and it's just, I'm pondering this, is the stormwater management. Maybe what should happen then is the stormwater management plan review is in section 2 as a current effort, and then revisions to it are included in section 3. Does that work? Okay. So that goes here. Thank you guys for putting up with me while I do this. I just feel like I know how life's gonna go, and if I don't do this right this minute, it won't get done. And then in here under, I'm gonna just put improvements to stormwater management. Okay. I feel like we've got some good fleshing out going on here. We are at 3:26. I think could make sense for me to send this out at the end of this meeting so you guys can all make sure you look at it. And then I would say, you know, John or Mike, if there's any part of it that you particularly want to dive into, I don't have you assigned to anything yet, but go for it. And then I guess I would just open the floor to if there's any other topics you guys want to talk about today. I know we can't make any motions on anything, but we can certainly discuss things if there's.
Are we into other business now?
There isn't that on the agenda, but we can, yes.
Okay, so I would like to request that other business be put on the agenda for every time.
I agree.
And then the other thing I'd like to request is underneath other business, possible action. Okay, because that has been noted.
Actually, if it's that vague, Arnie, that won't work because we can't have other business with no actual topic and then have a possible action. We need to have that I think is skirting the spirit of what
spirit of the law. Okay, well, if that's the case, I will go with you on that, even though I've seen other boards and and it's been suggested by several people on these boards. If you leave yourself the opportunity to close a meeting if you want to.
We can always adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, we close the meeting in terms of a closed meeting. Now, well, there's really no need for us at any point in time, I think, to have a closed meeting with this board. But they put those kind of spaces on the agenda just so that they could close a meeting if they wanted to.
I don't think we need that at this point.
I don't think we need it either. And I agree with you on the spirit of the law. That's if we're going to have an action item, we ought to define what it's going to be and ought to let the people know about it.
Yeah.
Okay, but we do need a section on there for other business so that we can talk about it. People know it. We're going to discuss other business.
We also could just return back to board and staff reports if you have some other business you would like to discuss.
There was something I wanted to talk about last month that we never got to. Did you remember what that was?
I've slept since then. Maybe not much, but I have slept since then.
If you don't remember, I don't remember either. Then we'll let that go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember. I'm sorry. So John, since I know you've had a hard time making it to meetings for a while, is there anything kind of burning issue for you that you feel like we're really missing the boat on, or you do or don't like about the direction we're taking on things right now?
I like it. My main concern here is the water budget.
Right.
It always has been. I think this town's heading towards a cliff if we don't wake up, and that's my main concern. I think this is going just fine.
Okay, then I will. I might stick your name on here somewhere to do that though, but I'll
stick my name on it. I'll do the best I can.
I'll stare at that for a minute before I send it out today. There's Carly. We were on the. We've kind of hit a point. so what we've been doing and this will hopefully be a good review for the rest of everybody. We've been going through the conservation draft plan outline that I sent out to everybody as homework and kind of fleshing out some areas. And some people have been taking on some assignments of things they might prepare in the next little while. I unkindly put both Mark and Levi on the spot saying, so gee, when can we expect some things? But more just to get a reasonable thought of like, I know there's a lot going on. So is it reasonable to maybe have a little bit about this by October or whatever? And then we fleshed out quite a bit for the board to be talking about and working on. And what I'm going to do at the end of the meeting is send this out to everybody immediately, because otherwise I will forget. And then that way people can look at, did I capture what we talked about different people would do? And then folks can start working on some stuff for the next meeting. So that's as far as we got. And since you are here, I hope everything's well and whatever emergencies came up. And I know you had a couple staff report things to put into all this.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it sounds like you guys have gotten a lot done without me. Do I even have to be at these meetings?
That's up to you.
No, I'm so happy to be part of them, but I'm glad it's been so productive. I'm so sorry for being away. My only staff report was related to the work that Mark and our engineering department was going to do. And it sounds like you guys have covered that a bit. Just because I know I committed to getting you word during the last meeting about potentially like the water use trends and demand management work that we have to do. So it seems like it's been covered, which is great.
Yeah. So yeah, we were kind of on the verge of like, gee, we don't have an other item on the agenda. So we're all sort of like, I think we're done, but
yeah.
So unless
I
there's
just have a comment if we,
yeah,
go ahead.
Go for it.
Well, just after everything pertinent has been said, I just have more of a, while I have everyone here, question. Is it really that unusual to find a 3-foot-long catfish up by the diversion at Ken's Lake out of Mill Creek? Because that's what I bumped into the other day. Has anyone ever bumped into that size fish up there? That typical?
Lake? Like on the river, sure.
No, not in the creek itself, but just below the diversion. Just got flushed through the diversion and not pushed down Faux Falls to Ken's Lake, but it was yeah. So in the creek itself, as if it had been living up above the diversion, had died maybe of natural causes at that size, and then half of it had been eaten and it got pushed through. And I just thought that was a little unusual, the size of it. I thought it was a bloated beaver, and I went down and took some pictures. It was a catfish, and I was just surprised to see that in the creek. But I don't know if anybody else has run into something like that.
I have not.
Could you send me some of those pictures? Because there's some folks at DNR who I could send that to, who I'm sure will know a whole lot than any of us here.
Yeah.
And also want to see it.
I want to see. Yeah, I want to see it too.
I'll send it to the board. I'll send it to the board as a discussion.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's some folks up at like Scott Gibson and Nicole Nielsen and a few other folks up in Price who I bet if they don't know all about it, they'll know who will want to know all about it.
Yeah, it was shocking. I mean, I measured it with a stick and it came clear up to my waist at about 36 inches. So it was big. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, that's my update.
All right. Now, if someone needs to top, I don't know if anyone can top that, but that's pretty good. Well, if there's not more to discuss, I'm fine with entertaining a motion to adjourn early.
Yeah, so Arnie, based on Jeremy's report of a big catfish up there, you were concerned about water temperatures in the area and how they're supposed to be cold enough to support colder water fish. Is a big catfish like that a bad data point from the standpoint of cold enough waters?
I'd let the fisheries biologist handle that. Catfish themselves can live in colder water, and that water above Chile diversion is usually pretty cold. It doesn't get much above 20 at all. But I would definitely go to a fisheries biologist. And the people that Cara's mentioned were the same people I was going to mention. They should see a picture of this. We should know if somebody threw a catfish in there, which is a very good possibility. So let's see what the fisheries biologists say.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a couple there's like 4 or 5 people I have on my list that I'll when I get that, I'll send it along to them.
The only time I did any fish surveys in Mill Creek, the lower part of Mill Creek, we went in one November, and we found the sculpins and the warm water tolerant species in Mill Creek below the North Fork, but we didn't find any catfish that day. That's for sure.
Oh, I've got just a different thing that we did that I was pretty excited about that has implications for maybe improving some shade on the creeks in town, which I know isn't strictly speaking our focus of this group, but we did a planting project along an area where we did some Russian olive clearing, which then of course had taken all the shade away from part of Pat Creek. And I didn't anticipate the storm we got on June, I think it was 6th, where we got that flash flood through town. And so we literally finished planting the day before that storm hit. And we used a new technique I've been playing with, taking willow tubes and digging down about 3 feet and planting that root ball at about 3 foot below ground level on some pretty steep banks. Definitely the whole incised area filled completely with water. I could tell that. So all of these were underwater, and almost every single one was still there 2 days later after that flood event. So that was encouraging to me that, I think there's some ways we can work on some planting mitigation that are time consuming to do, but they work. So I'll be taking some more pictures of that as it progresses. But that was pretty exciting in my weird little plant world. So
Cara, can I just ask, when you send the document, will you send a copy of it to us also, so we have record of that?
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much.
That's actually, thank you for reminding me that that's important. I know when I sent the homework out to everyone, I included Carly on that, but should I just,
That's okay.
of course, send that to you as well when I do stuff like that?
That would be great. Thank you.
I can do that. Not a problem. Thanks for the reminder. Okay, we're at 3:36. Anything else? Or do we want to entertain a motion to adjourn?
I will so move to adjourn.
Okay, any objections?
Thank you, Cara, Summer, Carly. Thank you, guys. Mark, thank you.
Y'all.
Thank you. Bye.